America was not born in a quiet room of reasoned debate. It was born from chaos, tension, and the thunder of cannon fire. As we approach the 250th anniversary of its founding, it's tempting to see the United States as inevitable, but its birth was anything but certain. The revolution was a gamble, a leap into darkness by ordinary people with everything to lose. The founders were not marble statues, they were flesh and blood, filled with doubt and fear, risking ruin for an idea. Their story is one of sacrifice and near failure, not simple victory. As we celebrate, we must look beyond parades and fireworks into the shadows of our own history. The story of America is not just about famous names, but about anonymous soldiers, women running farms, and enslaved people yearning for liberty. Their sacrifices are woven into the fabric of our nation. The journey to 1776 was a slow burn. Personal grievances became a collective cause. Colonists who once called themselves British came to see the crown as a tyrant. This transformation was painful, dividing neighbors and families. Understanding this evolution is key to understanding the American experiment. Freedom was not a gift, but a dangerous, revolutionary choice. The birth of America was fragile, messy, and deeply human. It asks us, even now, what are we willing to risk for an idea? For generations, colonists lived under a distant king, sharing a British identity and enjoying relative autonomy. But after the French and Indian War, the Crown's need for revenue brought new taxes and laws without colonial representation. The Sugar Act, then the Stamp Act, imposed direct taxes, violating what colonists saw as their rights. No taxation without representation was not a slogan, but a desperate plea. Protests erupted, tax collectors were threatened, but Parliament only tightened its grip. The Townshend Acts taxed everyday goods, and redcoats patrolled colonial cities. Soldiers, once protectors, became symbols of occupation. Daily life turned into small acts of rebellion, smuggling, boycotts, and homespun cloth. These were not grand gestures, but steady defiance. The colonists' sense of identity began to shift. They were becoming Americans. The vision of freedom they imagined was no longer compatible with the king's. The empire's hold was unraveling, one act of resistance at a time. The stage was set for revolution. The chain of empire had become a spark for independence. The American identity was being born in opposition. The Boston Tea Party was more than a protest over tea. It was a bold act of political defiance. The Tea Act gave the British East India Company a monopoly, making tea cheaper but asserting Parliament's right to tax. For the Sons of Liberty, this was the final straw. On December 16, 1773, after a tense meeting, a signal was given. Disguised as Mohawks, patriots marched to Griffin's Wharf and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. It was a calculated, orderly act, property destroyed to make a political point. The message: the colonists would not be ruled by a distant power ignoring their rights. London responded with fury, passing the coercive, intolerable acts, closing Boston's port and dissolving its government. Instead of isolating Boston, these harsh measures united the colonies. The spark in Boston ignited a continent-wide fire. The point of no return had been crossed. Revolution was now inevitable. By summer 1776, war was raging, but the colonies still owed allegiance to the king. The Second Continental Congress faced a fateful choice: declare independence and risk everything, or submit. Drafting the Declaration fell to Thomas Jefferson, who distilled the spirit of the age into a powerful argument for universal rights. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. On July 2nd, Congress voted for independence. On July 4th, they adopted Jefferson's words. The mood was somber. Signing meant risking death as traitors. John Hancock signed boldly, so the king could read it without spectacles. Each signature was an act of courage. These men had everything to lose. Benjamin Franklin quipped, "We must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. They were no longer fighting for rights as Englishmen, but for a new nation. The Declaration was a promise, a creed, and a death pact. The rebellion had become a revolution, the stakes had never been higher, the world would never be the same. The odds were staggering. Britain's military might against a ragtag continental army of volunteers. Led by George Washington, the Americans lacked supplies, training, and even shoes. Their strategy: survive, keep the revolution alive, and outlast the British. Early defeats nearly destroyed the army. Valley Forge became a symbol of suffering and resilience. Under Washington and Baron von Steuben, the army learned discipline and unity. French support, money, ships, and soldiers turned the tide. The siege of Yorktown, with French and American forces united, forced British surrender. The war didn't end instantly, but British resolve was broken. Ordinary people, farmers, shopkeepers, laborers, had outlasted an empire. Victory was not a single battle, but years of persistence and sacrifice. The impossible had become reality. The revolutionaries had won their freedom. A new nation was born from endurance. Freedom's price was paid in suffering, by ordinary people, not just generals. More Americans died in British prison ships than in battle, their sacrifice largely forgotten. The war was a civil conflict, tearing families and communities apart. Loyalists lost homes, property, and sometimes their lives. Many fled forever. Women ran farms, businesses, and households, keeping the revolution alive on the home front. Some, like Molly Pitcher, even fought alongside men. When soldiers returned, they found ruined farms and unpaid wages. Many veterans faced poverty and unrest, like Shays' Rebellion. The cost of liberty lingered for generations. The scars of revolution shaped the new nation. The birth of America left deep wounds. The struggle for freedom was never easy. The Treaty of Paris ended the war, but America was not yet a unified nation. 13 states, bound by a weak Articles of Confederation, bickered and nearly fell apart. The founders had declared equality, yet slavery and inequality persisted. Women's rights were ignored, native lands were targeted for expansion. The new republic was built on contradictions, freedom and oppression side by side. The founders wrestled with questions of power, unity, and liberty. The Constitution would emerge from years of debate and compromise. America was an experiment, not a finished product. The founders built mechanisms for change, knowing perfection was impossible. The nation was born in conflict and compromise. Its ideals and flaws were inseparable. The struggle to define freedom would continue for generations. The American experiment had only just begun. 250 years later, the echoes of 1776 still shape our debates and dreams. The founding is not just history, it's a living force in our present. The questions of liberty, equality, and justice remain unresolved. America 250 is a moment to reflect, to measure our progress and confront our failures. The Declaration's ideals still challenge us to perfect our union. Patriotism means ongoing work, not blind allegiance. Our nation is more diverse and complex than the founders imagined, but the core tensions endure. Progress is never inevitable. It requires effort from every generation. The revolutionaries gave us a republic, if we can keep it. Their story is our inheritance and our responsibility. The American experiment continues. Imagine 1776, not as a founder, but as an ordinary person facing impossible choices. To join the cause was to risk everything. To stay loyal was to betray new ideals. Would you choose safety or freedom, order or revolution? The patriots chose to risk chaos for the hope of self-government. That question is not just for them. It's for us. Every generation must decide what it stands for and what it will sacrifice. Freedom is not a monument, but a garden that must be tended. The story of America is the story of people making that choice again and again. Freedom was bought at a terrible price, paid by countless unnamed men and women. Their legacy is a challenge and a reminder of our republic's fragility. As we look back, we must ask, what will we risk for the future of this extraordinary nation? History is waiting for our answer. The American story is unfinished. Its next chapter is up to us.